I'm Aryeh Schwartz along with my co-host, Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Today we got a special guest and we're talking WNBA Finals. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. In our quest to bring as best WNBA Finals coverage we can, we brought someone on who's been through these finals a few times and walked away with some rings. Please join us in welcoming Brian Agler to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Coach, how are you? We're so happy to have you on. You did such a fantastic job on ESPN behind the booth. You might have a future in that, to be completely honest with you. We wanted to kind of expand on it. I think it's always fascinating to get, a head coach's perspective, someone, especially of your caliber, who's been there, who's won championships, and who understands kind of what's happening during this time frame and can explain that to the fans. But obviously, here we are in a tied series. We've had some dramatic things happen these last couple of days, but can you kind of just give us your general thoughts of, you've been in this position headed into a game 3, kind of what are your general thoughts as a coach, as a players, kind of headed into this Sunday matchup? What are your kind of general thoughts on it so far?
Well, number one, I think Connecticut's in a real good situation right now. And that has nothing to do with Elena Delle, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, here in a second. But when you can go on the road initially and get a game under your belt, a victory under your belt, I should say, and get that confidence, it really takes the pressure off. And now you're coming home and where you've had a lot of home success, and you're going to have a lot of energy in that arena that your team can feed off of. You've got a great opportunity sitting right there at your feet. And so it's just a matter of what you got to do now as a coach. If you're in Kurt's shoes, is you got to keep them grounded. You got to still focus on game 3 and try to play as well as you can in that setting. Don't try to look toward, you can't win a championship yet in game 3. I mean, that's the main thing. So you can't get ahead of yourself. And sometimes people and teams will do that. So his main job is to make sure they're fresh on Sunday. His main job is to get them prepared, make any kind of adjustments, and they'll have some adjustments to make. Even when you win, you have adjustments. Mm-hmm. Make those adjustments and keep the team grounded and keep them rested and fresh for Sunday. In regard to Washington, even though I still think they're a really, really good team without Elena, I don't think there is any way they're going to win this series without her. So their top priority, if they can, is to get her as much to healthy as possible. As I said, they're still going to be a good team. They still have weapons. They still are well coached. They're going to they're going to scheme well. They're going to execute well. But like I said earlier when I was doing the semis, your superstars, your bell ringers have to show up and play well. They have to log big minutes, and they have to play well. And without Elena, it's going to really be a burden for Washington to win this series. Can they stay in there? Can they can they be competitive? Absolutely. They still have some really good players and are extremely well coached. But in regards to, they've got to beat Connecticut now. They got to win one of the next 2, and they got to win 2 out of 3. And so they're going to need Elena to do that.
So, sorry, Rachel. Rachel, go.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to expand. I cut you off, Aryeh, because you're speaking about Elena and you're talking about preparation moving forward. Obviously there's a certain amount of time in between And it's a little bit uncertain. Maybe it's being a little bit kept secret. Maybe it truly is an unknown as to whether she is going to play or not. So can you talk a little bit more, like if you're Connecticut and you're Kurt Miller and you're preparing these few days, how are you preparing with the thought of she's there or she's not? Because obviously that changes the entire dynamic of a team. So if you're Connecticut, how do you prepare with her there or with not? Do you go through different scenarios? Or
no, you prepare.
You
just prepare for her being there. That's all you do, because you know that's the best team. You have to prepare for the best. So you have to anticipate her playing. That's all. Your prep is going to go into that until you know she's not, and you probably aren't going to know that till when it goes up, when the introductions are made. If I was Washington, I wouldn't be saying a whole lot right now in regards to her health. I thought they probably said a little bit too much, but that's water over the dam now. But in regards to Connecticut, you got to prepare for her being there, and they're, as you know, they're a much better team. I think Washington's up 2-0 if she plays in game 2.
Mm-hmm.
Well, talk about though on the Washington side, because whether or not they know more than they're telling, they still have to some degree. I mean, maybe they know for sure she's going to play, but I guess it does kind of bring into your mind a little bit more of, do you start to prepare of a game plan without her, and how do you go about that as a head coach?
Yeah, you definitely have to prepare for her not playing. Now, they have a lot more information than any of us do, so they're going to have a good idea whether she's going to be able to go or not. And I will say this, just because I think she's really hungry to win a championship, I think she's going to try to play, if I know her as well as I think I do.
Mm-hmm.
She's had a history of missing games, and she's had a history of being hurt and that. So, she's 30 years old now, or in that range, and these opportunities don't come. They're hard to get. I can't tell you how difficult they are to get to where they're at right now. She may not get another chance. As good as they are, you never know what's going to happen. They may not get back there again. So they have to fully take advantage of the situation. And I'm sure that they're hungry to do that just because of how it ended a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to prepare without her, hoping that she's going to play.
So something that's really intrigued me is, in a playoff series, it's so different than the series that you play during the season, the 3 to 4 games that you play. Talk to me a little bit about how you prepare kind of in a playoff series versus those same series during the regular season.
Well, in the regular season, you're playing these people, although Connecticut played Washington 3 times really early in the season, a couple games without Delle. But in the regular season, you prepare for one game and then you move on to the next one. So in this situation, as you're going through the playoffs, both these teams were top 2 seeds. So you had an idea that you're going to end up playing them down the road. So you start your prep, 10 days, 2 weeks, even before you start playing them. And then once you get into the series, and once you start seeing teams play in the playoffs, and most teams are going to add certain things, you obviously absorb that into your scout and you start prepping for that. Even though you may not practice against it in your mind, you're coming down, you say, okay, coming down the road here, we're going to have to be ready for X, Y, and Z. And so that's sort of the difference. In regular season, you got a couple days to prepare, you hit that game, and then you're on to the next one. Here, it's going to be a series. It's going to be 5 games. And even after each game, you have to reevaluate, things that went well for you and things that didn't go well for you. And you try to counter that, things that went well for your opponents, to try to take those things away in the next game. I think the last game, what you saw is you heard the communication of Connecticut saying they needed to get Jacquel Jones more involved in the offense. And they not only did that, but without the presence of Elena Delle, she really had the ability to just control things at the rim, scoring and rebounding. And, I think was the first player in the history of the playoffs, WNBA playoffs, that anybody had a 30 and 15 game.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows you how dominant she was in game 2.
Kind of expanding on that, just looking at just out of these 2 games, what are some of the things that teams struggle with? Connecticut, certain actions or certain things that obviously slowing down the Mystics offense is a struggle that for anyone, let alone just the Connecticut Sun. But, for me, I was really trying to analyzing just the different things the Sun were doing. You talked about JJ getting a lot more touches. That was a huge difference between game 1 and game 2. I thought another one was the rebounding numbers, whether that had a lot to do with Elena being in and out, that could be debated. But what are some of the things, the actions that you have seen the Sun struggle with, and vice versa, what the Mystics have struggled with? When facing each other?
What I've seen, Rachel, is I've seen Washington try to really take advantage of Shekinna Strickland at Connecticut's defensive end. They've really looked to attack her. Mm-hmm. And, Connecticut's, they've also looked at attack Courtney Williams. Mm-hmm. Connecticut's got 3 really, really good defensive players. Jonquel Jones obviously is one, just with her presence around the basket, her ability to challenge and block shots, and her ability to rebound. But with Alyssa Thomas and Jasmine Thomas, those are 2 elite defenders, and they can do it different ways. They're both really good on the ball. They can guard different types of players. They're very versatile. Mm-hmm. And they're both really good help defenders. Like Jasmine can really get out in the passing lanes, get deflections and steals. Alyssa is just so physical. She can body up, perimeter players. She can body up bigger post players. And just because of her strength, she can eliminate them getting to spots that they like to get to. So, Connecticut's a lot better defensively than what you might think. But Washington attacking Williams and attacking Strickland is what I've seen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, their ball movement and their spacing is always it's just a challenge for all teams in this league. And they do a great job of, the best way to guard this a lot of times is because if they're such a great passing team is to switch a lot of the pick and roll. But then when you do that, they go right to countering that with posting up their bigger post players on smaller guards. Mm-hmm. Now, going back to the Vegas series, when they did that, Vegas still had enough size in their rotations to challenge even that switch. They made it tough for Messiman in game 3 to take advantage of that. And what I thought Washington needed to do, and they ended up doing it in game 4, is instead of playing inside out with a post catch, play inside out off penetration. So attack your little against the opponent's big on the perimeter, really break them down off the dribble, force the defense to collapse and rotate, and then kick to shooters. And Washington's really good at that. And I think they'll have to continue to do that. And that's where Cloud and Atkins and some of the other secondary, not necessarily the Messiman and Delle, but some of the other people on their team are going to have to step up and hit shots.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about, last game, we're headed into game 3, but you've got kind of this gap here. Obviously, you're switching locations, headed up to Connecticut. Talk a little bit about what are teams doing during this period of time? Is it as much on court stuff as it is film preparation? Is it getting shots? Are teams taking a break? I mean, you've been in this scenario. What do these 5 days look like?
So they played Tuesday night. Wednesday would have been a travel day, so I doubt anybody did anything on the court on Wednesday. If they did, it was just a walkthrough and some shooting. Mm-hmm. But they spent that more for travel, and they probably needed that just from the standpoint of playing 2 games in 3 days. So yesterday and today and tomorrow are going to be, court days. But it's nothing more than staying sharp, putting in different tweaks to your offense, putting in different rotations to your defense that you may want to try to use. just staying sharp that way, doing walkthroughs, watching a lot of film, breaking that down, watching yourselves play, watching your opponents play, and really just trying to find ways to get better without you got to do two things. You got to stay sharp, but you can't wear your team out. It's a good balance right there. So I would say on court is probably an hour or less at the most, and you're probably watching film before and after practice. And then once Saturday comes around, now it's all prep. Now it's, whatever their their lead up practices to games are, they're probably going to try to stay in that routine. And then an afternoon game on Sunday, there probably won't be much of a walkthrough. It'll probably be get up, watch film, get a pregame meal, and then get over to the arena a little bit earlier if you don't do a walkthrough, just to get some shots up, and then get into your pregame routine.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach, I got a little bit put you on the hot seat. If you were a betting man, how many games does this series go?
I think you've got to look at it in two different ways. I think if Elena Delle does not play, or if she's not 100%, I think it goes 4 games and Connecticut wins it at home.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Elena Delle plays and she gets back to 100%, then I think it goes 5 games and Washington wins it.
All right, you heard it here, folks. the hot take from Coach Agler himself.
It all hinges on her right now, to me.
Yeah, no, I think everybody can agree on that one. There's no doubt about that, and we're obviously everyone is keeping their fingers crossed that she is recovering and feeling okay and able to play, because the world is just a better place with Elena Delle out on the court. So our thoughts.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think it was interesting for Kurt to say, to be quoted what he said. I agree with what he's saying, that, the series needs her in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be a lot. If he wants a ring, it's a lot better for him if she's not playing, because it's going to be a tough road, even though they've got to win on the road, which is very important. Now Washington's going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to go on the road and get one.
Well, it's as big as game changer as anything probably in the history of game changers. If we're talking about one player, whether she's playing or not, it really truly does in so many ways make such a difference. But let's switch gears here, Coach. You've got a lot going on yourself. Obviously, first year under your belt with the Dallas Wings. You guys have not been done long, but what have you been doing these last couple of weeks? We saw that you went and watched Team USA.
Yeah. So. For me, this is just me talking, I can't speak for other people, but like, even as we were starting to wind down our season, we were already starting to think about, the 2020 season, and just planning our strategy and how we're going to build our roster and what our needs are, and, how we're going to keep building our whole organization, really, basketball side of things. So we'd planned on this trip. I wanted to go down and watch, one, support Aryeh, number 2, watch Team USA play, and then I definitely wanted to see Canada play and Brazil play, because those two teams usually have, WNBA players or WNBA caliber players on their roster. And so I went down and watched the semis and the finals of that, and it was great. I enjoyed it. It's always nice my second time I've been to Puerto Rico, I enjoy it down there. And it was good to get down and talk to some of the people with USA Basketball and watch Aryeh play and watch the team play and scout these other teams. And then got back home, and then the next day, Lindsey Gottlieb was hired as an assistant to Cavaliers, and Christina Nigwe is on our team. So Christine was in Cleveland at the Cavaliers practice. So Bryce and I drove to Cleveland yesterday. I live in Ohio in the off season. And we drove up there and watched practice and had a chance to meet and visit with some of their staff, and had lunch with Christine and had a chance to visit with her. She's leaving for China here at the end of the month. And, just try to, stay in communication. It's part of, building your team. You just want to keep everybody on the same page as much as possible, and, give them the support that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Coach, with a breakout season that Aryeh had, I mean, how much does that affect the future roster moves and also what do you expect? I mean, like what is the ceiling for season 2?
The ceiling, I don't know. I think a lot will be determined on how our draft goes and how free agency goes and how people improve. And, we have, two really good guards that didn't play this year in Skylar and Mariah. And we know those two are going to help us in a big way. So there's a lot of things that, won't be the same as a year ago. So, our goal is just to try to keep improving and focus on each day, one day at a time, and just try to get better and try to position yourselves. That's all it is. Each season you try to position yourselves to get in the playoffs, and this league is always going to continue to get more competitive and more balanced. Teams are getting better, and good players are coming in the league, and not many are retiring, and so it's a very competitive situation. But I like our roster as it is. In regards to our youth, that we definitely have to get better, but through maturity, you usually do improve. We have some areas that we need to improve on with our roster. Some of those are going to be addressed with the addition of Skylar and Mariah. We anticipate Aryeh being healthy and playing next year. So, and Taylor Hill as well. So there's 4 pretty good players that are going to be added without even talking about draft or free agency. So we're going to be improved, but it's still a process of building and knowing that we want to be playing this time of the year at some point.
Mm-hmm. And as you do that, headed into the off season when the WNBA Finals are long done and players have gone overseas, and what does this off season look like for you? How do you spend your time? You spend your time headed to, obviously you're watching this draft class as much as possible, but kind of tell the listeners what does a WNBA head coach do this time of year?
Right now is probably the slowest time in regards to activity. Just because the college season hasn't started. So getting out and watching practices, and then putting our schedule together for our college scout, and also putting our schedule together with if we decide to go overseas and watch some of the international teams play. This year is going to be a little bit different because USA Basketball is going to put a team together that travels, and they're going to play 4 games early on in November. They're going to play at Stanford on November the 2nd, at Oregon State on November the 4th, at Texas A&M on November the 7th, and then back out to Oregon on November the 9th. So those will be games that will be interesting to watch, just because they have WNBA players, really good ones, in the game playing against some really good prospects coming into the league. It's good to always see those people go head to head. And then just try to find the good matchups to watch, the interconference matchups, so who are the best teams this year? You got Oregon, you got Texas A&M, you've got Baylor, you can go through it. There's 7 or 8 really good teams that are going to have 1 or 2 potential first round draft picks. So you want to watch those teams play and get an idea of, okay, so here's what our needs are, here's who we think is going to be available at this pick, and then really hone in on those people and get a good evaluation.
Well, that's great to hear, Coach, and thank you for your time. As we always say to finish our episodes, we believe the players of the W and its community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receives on a daily basis. Please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us in the hard work that we do. And a big thank you to head coach Brian Agler. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right.